Chapter 9 of the Book of Camping and Woodcraft, a guidebook for those who travel in the wilderness. The Book of Camping and Woodcraft, a guidebook for those who travel in the wilderness, by Horace Kephart. Chapter 9. Marksmanship in the woods. Out of the thousands of men who go out every fall to hunt with a rifle, only a few have any opportunities during the close season for rifle practice under conditions similar to those they'll meet in the wilderness. By far the larger number must be content with such facilities as they can find on a rifle range, where the shooting is done at known distances, over a clear field, at stationary targets, and with no time limit. The fortunate few who live all the year round in thinly settled regions, where they can try their rifles in the woods whenever they feel like it, are prone to think lightly of the city man's rifle clubs. I will never forget the remark that a backwoodsman once made when I was trying to entertain him at a rifle match near St. Louis. I had shown him the shooting house, the target house, and their appurtenances. He had explained our system of scoring and our code of rules, had told him the reasons for using such heavy rifles, sensitive triggers, prolonged plates, cheek pieces, palm rests, vernier and wind gauge sights, all that, and that had made him watch some of our experts as they made bull's-eye after bull's-eye, seldom missing a space the size of a man's head, shooting offhand at 20 measured yards. I thought that my friend would be impressed. He was, but not quite as I had anticipated. After watching the firing for a long time in silence, he turned to me and remarked, "If it weren't for the noise and the powder smoke, this would be a very ladylike game." Of course, I was piqued at this, and felt like giving the honest fellow a peppery reply. And yet, many a time since, as I have sat, chilled to the bone, on some crossing in the high Smokies, training my ears to the bear dogs far below, or, tired beyond speech and faint from hunger, as I lay down beside a log in the great forest, all alone, or blown by hard climbing till my heart seemed bursting, as I wiped the mist from my eyes and got down on all fours to follow a fresh spoor into the hideous laurel vastness of God-forsaken, aye, many a time I have looked backward and thought, "You were right, partner, it was a very ladylike game." But let us not be too hard on the city man's rifle range. It is all he has to burn powder on, and is far better than no range at all. The pity is that he does not make better use of it. I speak now of civilian, not military ranges. It was a blunder when we abandoned the old standard American rules, which did at least recognize the rifle as a weapon instead of a toy, and were led astray by a foreign system for which we have not yet found so much as an English name. The Stuchian system does teach a man to hold steadily and let off delicately, and this is the ABC of workmanship, but it stops there. It teaches the ABC forward and backward till the pupil becomes, perhaps, wonderful expert in such exercise, but it never gets beyond ABC and XYZ. It weds a man to a toy, so that any practical weapon seems awkward to him. It teaches him to drive a nail with a bullet, but it makes him too slow, altogether too slow for the man's game of hunting or war. The most hopeful sign of our time, from a rifleman's viewpoint, is the move to establish, near all of our large cities, military rifle ranges, to which civilians will be admitted for target practice. Offhand shooting at the shorter ranges with regular hunting rifles, or with military rifles, together with skirmish drill, is excellent training for hunters of big game. But in any case, practice. Use a .22 in a city basement if you can do no better. It is practice, intelligently varied practice, that makes the marksman. As for a hunting rifle, get the best you can, of course, but do not worship it. Bear in mind that, whatever its trajectory and killing power, it is only a gun, and can kill nothing that you miss with it. When you get into the real wildernesses, far away from the rich men's preserves and summer hotels, you will find there are some mighty hunters who make mighty kills with guns of the vintage of 1966 or earlier, guns that would bring only the price of scrap iron in New York. Get sights that you can see, and such as you are not likely to overshoot when taking quick aim. Take pains to get what suits your eyes, and spare no time in the adjustment. Never take an untried gun into the woods. That is no place to align sights and test elevations. Never trust the sights as they are placed on the gun at the factory. Test them not only from rest, but offhand too. For a light rifle charged with high-power ammunition is likely to shoot several inches higher, or some other direction, when fired from muzzle and elbow rest at 50 yards than it does when shot offhand, albeit it may be an accurate weapon when rightly used. Now for adjusting the elevation, a most important matter. First, by all means, find the point blank of your weapon by actual test. Take nobody's say for it. If your dealer assures you that a certain rifle shoots practically point blank up to 200 or 300 yards, trust him not. He's fooling thee. Never lose sight of the fact that, in a timbered country, 9/10 of big game is shot inside of 75 yards. Now, it's a prime essential that your rifle should be so sighted that its bullet will not rise or fall outside a 1-inch circle at 25 yards, a 2-inch circle at 50 yards, a 3-inch circle at 75 yards. If it has been sighted to strike center at 200 yards, it will shoot far above these limits at the short distances here mentioned, no matter how powerful may be the charge. Let me give an example to show how easily one can be fooled in such matters. Here is a high-power rifle. The initial velocity of its bullet is 2,000 feet a second, a trajectory 5 inches at 100 yards, when shot 200 yards. At the factory, the sight's been set for the latter distance by aiming with the top of B just touching the bottom of an 8-inch bullseye. In other words, the gun shoots 4 inches above the point actually aimed at. Now at 100 yards, this gun will shoot 2 inches too high, plus the trajectory, 5 inches, minus sight allowance, angle of line of aim to line fire, depending upon height of front sight above axis of bore, say 1/2 inch allowance midway of range. That is to say, this rifle shoots 7 inches too high at 100 yards. Is that practically point blank? How would you like it? As a general rule, a high-power rifle for hunting big game should have its sights adjusted with precision for 2 distances, namely, the strike point actually aimed at when shooting offhand, first at 80 yards and, second adjustment, at 160 yards. Then fix the rear sight so that it cannot work down below the 80-yard point, and notch the 160-yard point so you can feel it with your thumbnail without looking. With the 80-yard elevation, your rifle will shoot on a line practically level up to 100 yards, and with the 160-yard elevation it is good, for it gives vitals at any distance up to 200 yards. Under all conditions, that will make such shots justifiable. It will not shoot over nor under an 8-inch circle in any distance up to 20 yards when aimed for the center. But carry the rifle habitually with sights set for 80 yards. Then you can decapitate a grouse or squirrel, strike a bear through the eye at close quarters, and kill a deer 100 yards away when only his head is visible, without making any allowance for distance in either case. Always provided, my brother, that your own part of the performance is up to scratch. A rifle using black powder should be sighted for 50 and 100 yards respectively. As for trigger pull, suit yourself, but never tolerate a trigger that will easily jar off. Remember, too, that your trigger finger will soon get calloused in the woods, and that it will often be numb with cold. Have a sling strap on your gun, particularly if you are to hunt in the mountains. Take only one kind of ammunition when you go after big game. On such a trip, one seldom shoots at small fry, unless the large animals fail to show themselves. Even then, one shoots no more than he needs, and if he does occasionally blow a grouse to pieces, it doesn't matter. If he should take along both full power and reduced charges, he should always be fussing over his elevations, and might some day find himself with a squirrel loading his gun confronting a moose. Be sparing in your load of ammunition. When one hunts large game, even where it is plentiful and unprotected, he will not average 2 shots a day, allowing liberally for misses and for pot boilers on small game. 50 rounds are ample for a 2 months' trip into farthest no-man land, and 20 are enough for a month wherever number of heads allowed is limited. Remember what weight of lead you carried around last year and how much of it you lugged back home or gave away. Targets offered by large animals in the woods are about as different as anything could be from the targets used on rifle ranges. If you are still hunting, the odds are you will not see the game until it is sneaking stealthily but swiftly away. There are trees in the way and brush. Your footing may not be secure. The light may be shining in your eyes, and with it all you must shoot quick or lose the opportunity. Yet if you shoot so quickly that you merely aim at the animal as a whole instead of at some particular spot, the chances are you'll miss altogether. Yes, miss a full-grown deer 20 paces. The points to be observed are to be as alert at all times as though you are hunting grouse without a dog, to get your gun in position the instant you see the game, pick it out as quick as lightning, a clear space through which to fire, but above all things not to shoot until you're absolutely certain that it is game you're shooting at, and then to dwell on the aim just long enough to see your bead clearly and hold for a vital spot. Beyond that, do not hesitate the fraction of a second. To give a novice an idea, I would say that 3 or 4 seconds is a fair average interval between raising the rifle and firing, when a deer has been jumped in the forest. It is not so much the hands, but the eyes and brain, that must be quick, very quick. Of course, this is only a general proposition. Many times one has a chance for deliberate aim, though not when he is still hunting. Yet, I think, it is best to spend most of one's target ammunition in snap shooting. By snap shooting with a rifle, I do not mean merely glancing along the barrel and disregarding the sights. You must see your bead, and, in case of open sights, you must see that the bead is well down on the notch. But it is snap shooting to press the trigger instantly when it first touches, rather when it swings close to the object that you want to hit, instead of waiting to swing back and steadily down, as one would do when aiming deliberately. To snap shoot at the right instant, without pulling off to one side, is a fine art. The main trouble in such cases is to select the right spot to shoot at, and then to find it over the sights. With a deer, for example, the color is so neutral and the outlines are so indistinct, even in good light, that a man's eyes can seldom distinguish the exact spot that he wants to hit. He judges where it must be from the general bulk of the animal and the position in which it is presented. For a broadside shot, the best point to shoot for is immediately behind the shoulder and only 1/3 of the way up from breast to withers, that is, where the heart lies. When the body is presented in any other position, shoot, as a rule, at such a point as the bullet, in ranging forward, will pass through or close to the heart. When an animal stands looking at me, as a deer often will when it comes in on a runaway, and one bleats or whistles at it, my favorite shot is the neck. A bullet passing through any animal's neck is almost sure to strike a paralyzing knockout blow, because it can scarcely miss a vital part. In shooting at a running animal, when you are in the timber, do not first hold on the breast and then swing ahead, but pick out an open space that the game will cross and shoot instant before it crosses. Then you will, at least, not send your bullet whack into an intervening tree. Aim low when shooting downhill, because then you see more of the upper side of the animal than you ordinarily would. A shot high up is seldom fatal unless you hit the spine. In making long shots downhill, do not forget that the only distance to be allowed for is that from the mark to a point directly under you and level with the mark. Aim dead on when shooting uphill, unless the range is greater than your rifle is sighted for on a level. The extra allowance for lift is so trifling at ordinary ranges that you had better disregard it than overdo the matter. Deliberate shooting, as distinguished from snap shooting, can only be practiced at game in an open country, such as many parts of the West. In the East and South, nearly all shooting is in thick timber. Although one sometimes gets a shot over the water, long shots at game standing clearly outlined against the sky or water call for no comment, as they are comparatively easy for one who has had considerable experience in the rifle range, if he or she does not misjudge the distance and sighting allowance, and if he does not get buck ague. This latter affliction is more likely to seize upon the novice when he is sitting on a stand and hears the dogs baying towards him. It is hard on a fellow's nerves to sit there, praying with all his soul that the bear may not run some other way, and yet half doubtful of his own ability to head it off if it does come his way. The chances are that it will by no means run over him, but that it will come crashing through the brush at some point on one side, toward which he will have to run with all his might and main before firing. Now, if he does let that bear through, and after all the hard work of dogs and drivers, his shirt tail will be amputated that night by his comrades and hung from a high pole in the midst of the camp. A flag of distress, indeed. Who wouldn't get buck ague in the face of such alternative? It is hard on a fellow's nerves, I say, to hear those dogs coming towards him, and to know from the racket that a bear is certainly ahead of them, but not to know where or when the brute may emerge, or what infernal trees and thicket and downwood may be in the way. Can you hit him? That is the question. The honor of the camp is on your shoulders. Ah me! It is easy to follow the pack on horseback, to chase after something that is running away. But to sit here chewing your mustache while at any moment a hard-pressed and angry bear may burst out of the thicket and find you in his way, and nothing but you between him and nearby freedom. Gentlemen, test nerve. Ask any old soldier whether you would rather charge or be charged. Buck ague is not the effect of fear. In fact, fear has nothing to do with it. It's a tremor and a galloping of the heart that comes from over-anxiety lest you should fail to score. Precisely the same seizure may come upon you on the target range. That is the only place that I have experienced it. There is no telling when it may strike. I have known seasoned sportsmen to be victimized by it. Yet when the critical moment does come, it often turns out that the man who has been shaking like a leaf from pent-up anxiety suddenly grows cold and steady as a rock. Especially is this apt to be the case when a fighting beast comes suddenly into view. Instantly the man's primeval instincts are aroused. His fighting blood comes to the surface. The spirit of some warrior ancestor, dead maybe these thousands of years, possesses and sways your mild-eyed modern man, and he who trembled but a moment ago now leaps into the combat with a wild joy playing on his heartstrings. End of chapter 9.